Hello, this is Brian. Today is Wednesday, June 5th, 2024, and I'm here at the Grays Peak Trailhead here on the north shore of Big Bear Lake here in San Bernardino County. And today, it's already after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so there's no way I'm starting a hike. Normally, this would be a place where I would start a hike to Grays Peak. However, I already did my hiking for the day, up to Onyx Peak and some random peak nearby. So today I want to do an ode video, a long-awaited ode video to a very special tree to me, and it's the Jeffrey pine, Pinus jeffreyi. That's about 90% of the trees that are here are Jeffrey pines. Pinus jeffreyi, a beautiful venerable Jeffrey pine. One of the most common trees around Big Bear Lake is the Jeffrey pine. It's one of the most common trees around. And how I can tell this is a Jeffrey pine, I can smell a little sweet vanilla cookie smell out of the bark. That's not always a telltale sign. Occasionally ponderosas will have that as well. But the large cones of the Jeffrey pine, and they get larger than this too sometimes. And then also, couple things. The prickles usually face down, and sometimes they curve back a little bit. And then also, the bottoms of the cone scales are roughly the same shade of darkness as the top. So they're both about as light. The top of the scale is about as light as the bottom scale. On ponderosas, the bottom scales are darker, and the upper scales are usually lighter. And usually the ponderosa pines prickles stick down and out. So here we are. This one's got a medium girth to it. However, this is a very tall tree. So this is not even an old growth tree, but this is a very tall one. That's why I'm starting with this one here. So let's go try to back up a little bit and see if we can get some perspective of this tree here. This is an absolutely lofty specimen here. This thing's probably at least 170 feet tall. It's got to be at least 170 feet tall. They do get very large here in the San Bernardino Mountains. They get really large in the Sierras too. So just look at that magnificent Jeffrey pine right here at the Grays Peak Trailhead. And we do have other very large ones here that have girthier trunks. Maybe not quite as tall. It's one of the tallest ones around here. But just a little bit of background information on the Jeffrey pine in case you haven't seen my spotlight video on Jeffrey pines that I filmed in Angeles National Forest back in 2019. Jeffrey pine is obviously an evergreen coniferous tree, in other words, bearing cones, all the pine cones there, and it's a member of the pine family, Pinaceae, and it is also a member of the yellow pine group. So it is related fairly closely to the ponderosa pine, as it is a member of the ponderosa group. Ponderosas generally get larger, but Jeffrey pines can get very large, especially in the Sierras and also here in the San Bernardino Mountains. They can get very large here too. Some of these are actually massive trees. Some of these are some of the tallest ones I've seen. Typically, usually about up to 140, 130, but then some of these are probably, some of these are closer to 150, 160, but that one's probably closer to 170. That's a very tall tree. And then for some more background information, its distribution ranges from southwestern Oregon down the spine of the Sierras down to the mountains of Ventura, Santa Barbara, Ventura County, LA County, the San Gabriel Mountains, the San Bernardino Mountains, obviously where we are, and then south through the San Jacinto Mountains and scattered through the mountain ranges of San Diego County, including Palomar Mountain, Hot Springs Mountain, the Cuyamaca Mountains, the Laguna Mountains, down into northern Baja California at its southern range extension in the Sierra de San Pedro Martir mountain range, southeast of Ensenada. Well, yeah, magnificent trees. And I gotta wipe a little bit of that dip there off of my camera. But yeah, magnificent trees. So now that I got some of the background information out, now we can just take an appreciative look at these trees. This one, you could tell, is starting to get older. When they're younger, they're more deeply furrowed, but when they get older, they start breaking out into these plates. I'm going to go over here and show you one. See here, the bark breaks out into relatively flat, furrowed plates. And sometimes the bark on the Jeffrey pine can be nearly indistinguishable from the ponderosa pine. Ponderosa pine tends to have wider bark plates, but Jeffreys can have them too. And in some areas, ponderosas can also have that vanilla scent that emanates from their bark, whereas Jeffrey pines pretty much always have that, which really carries on these warm days. Like today, it's probably about 82, 83 degrees out here. It's pretty warm out here at Big Bear. So I can definitely smell it in the air very strongly. And it's a delightful, sweet, bakery-like aroma. And then, of course, some more background information. Jeffrey pine being a yellow pine, and not all yellow pines have this, but needles in threes, and quite long needles. Some Jeffrey pines even have longer needles than these. But what a magnificent species. It's a tree I come across very regularly on my mountain hikes because it is one of the most common, if not the most common, pine in the Southern California mountains. And that's by total experience. Pretty much everywhere I've gone hiking, especially on my vacation this week, just about everywhere I've gone hiking, there's been Jeffrey pine, and quite numerous actually. So it's definitely a tree to appreciate and venerate. So I'm going to go ahead and snap a couple pictures, and I'll keep rapping a little bit more about these trees. So let's take a look at these lovely younger Jeffrey pines. And there's the sign for the Grays Peak trailhead. Yeah, like I said, I am not going up to Grays Peak today. It's a little too warm to be starting to hike this late in the day. Like I said, I already started and finished up a hike today up on the southeast of Big Bear near Onyx Summit. And you got a view of, again, the predominant tree rimming Big Bear Lake. Majority of those trees right there, those are all Jeffrey pines right there. Those are Jeffrey pines. The majority of those trees on that ridge back there behind the lake, the majority of those, guess what? Majority of those are Jeffrey pines too. So it's a very common fixture of our Southern California mountainscape. So let's go walk around a little bit and let's take a look at some of these at the base of this hill here. Just want to see. Yeah. These are more the average size ones that we typically see when we're hiking in the mountains. Well, maybe a little bit taller than average, actually, to be honest. I don't usually get to the San Bernardino Mountains too often. Quite a distance from where I live. So we're going to come up to some bigger Jeffrey pines over here at the base of this forest. We're going to take a loving look at some fantastic trees. Here we are at the base of some very hefty, girthier Pinus jeffreyi. Right here by this picnic table. That was the really tall one right there in the center. That's the one I started with. And that one doesn't even have much girth to it either. That's amazing. That's just a very tall tree. And these trees aren't lacking either in height. But I think that one might be a little bit taller. But some of these other ones are just huge. Some of these are big trees. And again, here's the plated bark of the more mature Jeffrey pine. Ponderosas will usually tend to be a little yellower. But that's not always it's not always a telltale sign that you're looking at a Jeffrey versus ponderosa. If it's yellow ponderosa, doesn't always mean that. So let's look at these magnificent specimens here. And Jeffrey pine is the only yellow pine in this general vicinity. Over on the other side of Big Bear, you might run into some ponderosas. And also, more to the west towards Running Springs is where you start running into more ponderosa pines. So you can actually look at the trees side by side sometimes and tell apart. And then over by Angeles Oaks, you also have ponderosa. I think both ponderosa and Jeffrey. And you also have coulter pine, which is actually a close relative of both of these trees and has a absolutely gargantuan heavy cone with big sharp claws. That's the coulter pine. And it also grows with Jeffrey pine and sometimes hybridizes with Jeffrey pine. I have come across hybrids between the two. Yeah. What magnificent, beautiful trees these are. And the ones with the branches that kind of sprawl out all crazy, those are sugar pines. Those are the king of the mountain forests here. Those are the trees that get the largest. But yeah, but again, we're talking about our beautiful Jeffrey pines, named after John Jeffreyi. Look how beautiful that is. That's insane. I love these big trees here. Absolutely beautiful stunners right here. Right next to Highway 18. Here, Big Bear Lake is just across the road. We're right near Grout Bay right now. But yeah, I just need to take some time to appreciate. So this is less of a tree identification video and more of an appreciation, as it is an ode video to a magnificent, magnificent tree that makes up a majority of our mountain forests here, especially in Southern California. I'm gonna go shoot a couple more pictures and then probably start wrapping this up. I'm letting basically, I know I'm talking a lot and yapping, but also letting the trees speak for themselves. So let's get a few pictures of these trees here. So here's just admiring these Jeffrey pines. A couple random facts about Jeffrey pines that I find makes it fascinating and definitely worth mentioning in an ode video is that typically in the Sierras, these trees are generally above 6,000 feet up to over 9,000 feet. And they tend to be more prevalent above 6,000 feet in Southern California, depending on where you are. Now, ponderosa pine is usually the lower elevation yellow pine here in California. One of the lower elevation. Coulter pine actually can go even lower than ponderosa here in SoCal. But here in Southern California, I have seen Jeffrey pines as low as just above, maybe about 3,500 feet in San Diego County. Pine Valley. Pine Valley's named probably after the Jeffrey pines that grow there. And that sits at about 3,500, 3,600 feet. Descanso also has Jeffrey pines, and those are communities off Interstate 8 east of Alpine, going towards Cleveland National Forest. So yeah, in San Diego County, Jeffrey pines grow at surprisingly low elevations. And I've seen it myself, and I know they're Jeffrey pines. Also, Garner Valley in Riverside County, which is between Thomas Mountain and the San Jacintos, and it's south of Idlewild, that area is mostly around 4,400 feet, and where you'd expect to see ponderosa pines, you see Jeffrey pines instead. So yeah, it's not always a tried and true rule, but if you're driving along 74, if you're driving along 74 through Garner Valley, those tall pine trees all around you, most of those are Jeffrey pines. There are probably a few coulter pines mixing in too. But yeah, in Southern California, they can grow at surprisingly low elevations, maybe even lower than some of the Sierras, where you'd expect trees to start lower down because it's a wetter, more northerly climate than where we are here. But no, fun facts, Jeffrey pines can be found at surprisingly low elevations. And then again, they can be found here at almost at the summit of Mount San Antonio, windswept and as a Krumholtz. But yeah, usually around here is where you get the best development. Usually between 6,000 and 9,000 feet is where we get the best development of Jeffrey pine stands here in Southern California. But like I said, you can find these trees at pretty low elevations here in SoCal, especially in San Diego County. For some reason, San Diego County seems to have some of the lowest elevation Jeffrey pines I've ever heard of. But it's just amazing, amazing. What absolutely beautiful trees these are. I'm glad to be out here to finally, after years of admiring them and documenting them on my hikes, now I can actually finally did a spotlight back in 2019. Now it's time to do the ode to these beautiful trees. Look at that. Pinus jeffreyi. What a magnificent tree. Well, I think that's going to kind of wrap this one up. So I hope you enjoyed the little bit of review, almost like the spotlight portion of it, kind of like a review of the general characteristics, but also just took a loving look at an absolutely momentous tree here in Southern California. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on another ode video.